Ethan had never imagined his life would take such a drastic turn when he boarded the cargo ship Orion's Dawn. A simple medic, he had signed on for the journey to deliver medical supplies to the far reaches of space. Little did he know, this would be the day that would change everything. The ship shuddered violently as the sirens blared, signaling an unexpected attack. Red lights flashed across the narrow hallways as crew members scrambled, trying to figure out what was happening. Ethan quickly made his way to the med bay where he could help treat any injured crew, but the chaos outside was unlike anything he had seen before. Raider ships had ambushed the cargo vessel. A hail of plasma fire pounded the ship's shields, rattling every inch of metal. The Orion's Dawn groaned under the strain, and the power flickered. Ethan's heart raced, but he kept his focus. He couldn't afford to panic. As the ship rocked, the door to the med bay slammed open, revealing a frantic woman carrying a small, unconscious child in her arms. Her skin was a deep blue hue, unlike anything he had ever seen, and her long hair shimmered like strands of silver. She collapsed in front of him, her voice strained with panic. "Please help my child," she pleaded, her eyes wide with terror. Ethan didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, taking the child from her. He could tell immediately that the situation was dire. The child was pale, almost lifeless, and there was a deep gash on the side of his head, leaking what appeared to be a thick, greenish blood. The woman's breathing was heavy with fear, and her face was twisted in helplessness. "Zathra," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My son, he needs you." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't afford to waste time. He set the child down on the medbay table and began to assess the injury. His hands moved quickly, the trained instincts of a medic taking over. The ship's emergency lighting flickered again, casting brief flashes of light across the room. The woman stood nearby, wringing her hands, her eyes glued to her son. He worked tirelessly, stitching up the gash on the child's head, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. But even with all his experience, there was something far more dangerous at play. The ship lurched again, harder this time, and a sharp crack echoed through the medbay as a massive piece of the ship's ceiling ripped loose. Ethan barely had time to react. In a split second, the jagged metal beam fell directly toward the child. Ethan, without thinking, dove across the room, knocking the child out of the way just in time. But the beam came down hard on Ethan's side, slamming into him with bone-crushing force. He gritted his teeth, but pain exploded in his chest, his vision blurring. The woman screamed, but Ethan could barely hear her over the ringing in his ears. He lay there, the weight of the beam pressing down on him. He could feel blood soaking through his shirt, but his only concern was the child. The child had to survive. With every ounce of strength, Ethan rolled off the beam, using his good arm to pull himself over to the child's side. He checked Zathra's pulse. It was weak, but still there. A small, thankful sigh escaped his lips. But the battle wasn't over. Ethan's vision began to darken and the room spun. His body felt heavy, every breath more difficult than the last. He forced himself to stand, pulling Zathra closer, trying to steady his breath. He could hear the woman's frantic voice, but it was as if it were coming from a great distance. "Please, save him," she repeated, her voice breaking. Ethan reached for his medical kit, pulling out an injection to stabilize the child. He injected the medicine into Zathra's arm, and slowly, with great effort, the boy's breathing began to ease. But Ethan's own body was failing him. His head grew heavy and his limbs were losing strength. The woman's hands trembled as she moved closer, reaching out to touch him. She was speaking, but Ethan could barely understand her words. He had to focus. He couldn't afford to fall unconscious. He was the only one who could help the child now. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and his vision narrowed to a tunnel. The woman stepped forward, her alien features more pronounced in the dim light. She placed a hand gently on his shoulder, her touch warm and comforting, though her eyes were filled with desperation. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've saved my son's life." But as the words left her lips, Ethan's body gave out. He collapsed to the floor, everything going black. When he awoke, Ethan found himself in a different place. The air was thick and sterile, and the gentle hum of medical equipment filled the silence. He could feel a soft pressure on his side, the place where the beam had crushed him. As his vision slowly cleared, he saw the woman from before sitting beside him. Her features still so otherworldly, but now softened with a sense of relief. "You are awake," she said, her voice low and steady. Ethan tried to speak, but his throat felt dry and his words came out as a rasp. "The child? Is he..." He lives, she answered, her voice warm with gratitude. And you've saved him. Ethan struggled to sit up, but the pain in his side made it impossible. He gritted his teeth. I didn't do it for thanks, he said, his voice strained. The woman's eyes softened. But you did it for him. And now you are bound to us. Ethan blinked, confused. What do you mean? She smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. In my culture, saving a child is more than just an act of kindness. It creates a bond. One that cannot be undone. Ethan was too exhausted to understand. He lay back against the medical bed, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over him. But at the same time, a sense of uncertainty crept in. What had he done? What had he agreed to by saving this child? The woman stood, her form towering over him. I am Lyra, and this is my son Zathra. You've done something no one else has ever done. You have saved us. Ethan's eyes fluttered, and his mind began to cloud once again. Before he could ask more questions, Lyra's soft voice echoed in his ears. You've earned our trust, Ethan, more than you know. Ethan's eyes slowly opened, his senses fighting to shake off the fog of pain and exhaustion. His body felt heavy, as though it had been drained of all energy. He could hear a soft hum, a faint mechanical sound in the distance. His head swam with confusion as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The first thing he noticed was the clean, sterile environment. It was unlike the dimly lit med bay on the Orion's dawn, where the air had been thick with panic and chaos. This place was different, calm and organized, with high-tech medical equipment lining the walls. Ethan lay on a bed, his body wrapped in bandages, but the pain was duller now. His mind raced as fragments of memory surfaced. The explosion. The falling beam. The alien child. Lyra's face. Lyra. He turned his head, his gaze searching the room. There she was, standing at the far end, her hands clasped in front of her, her eyes filled with a strange, quiet intensity. The soft, silvery glow of the room made her skin shimmer, and her long, flowing hair seemed almost to float around her. Her presence was commanding, yet she seemed deeply at ease, almost as if she were waiting for something. Lyra, Ethan said, his voice rough. It felt like his throat had been scrubbed raw, but he needed answers. She looked up at him, her expression softening into a gentle smile. You're awake. Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying warmth in her words. I'm glad you're well. Ethan shifted, pushing himself up slightly, but the sharp pain in his side made him wince. He fell back onto the bed, groaning. What happened? Where am I? Lyra took a few steps toward him, her footsteps light and almost silent. You're safe now, Ethan. We're aboard my ship, the Eldoria. You were severely injured, but we've treated your wounds. She paused, looking down at him with a kind of solemn respect. You saved my son. Zathra owes you his life. Ethan tried to sit up again, determined to understand everything. Zathra, he's okay? Lyra nodded, her eyes softening. He's recovering. The injury was serious, but nothing we couldn't heal. You did more than just save him. You protected him with your life. Ethan swallowed, feeling an unfamiliar weight settle in his chest. You didn't have to, Lyra interrupted gently, her voice firm yet compassionate. But you did. You shielded him with your own body, even when it cost you your strength. Ethan shook his head, still processing the gravity of the situation. I just did what anyone would have done. He's a child. I couldn't let him die. Lyra's gaze was intense now, her eyes searching his face as if she were looking for something. That's why it's so rare. Your actions go beyond what anyone would expect of a human. You are different, Ethan. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I'm just a medic. I'm not anything special. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a seat beside him, her posture elegant yet approachable. In my culture, saving a child is not simply an act of heroism. It's a bond between protector and the protected. It is a bond that lasts a lifetime. For my people, it's sacred, Ethan frowned, confused. A bond? Yes. Lyra's voice was steady as she spoke. It means that the one who saves a child becomes bound to the child's family, to the mother. It is a gesture of great respect and often a sign of something much deeper. A bond that goes beyond gratitude. You've saved my son, and in doing so, you've entered into that bond with me. You are now connected to me and Zathra in ways that neither of us can undo. Ethan felt his heart race. He couldn't quite understand the depth of what she was saying. The bond she spoke of sounded like something far beyond the realm of ordinary human relationships. I didn't mean for this to happen, he said, his voice soft, though he felt the pressure of her words sinking in. I just wanted to save the kid. Lyra's gaze softened and she placed a hand on his shoulder. I understand. But that is the way of my people. When you save a life in this way, it's not just a gesture of goodwill, it's a promise, an unspoken agreement. And once it is made, it cannot be broken. Ethan's mind spun as he processed her words. He was connected to this alien woman, to Zathra, in ways he had never imagined. He had never thought of himself as a hero, just a medic doing his job. But now this strange and powerful alien woman was telling him that his actions had created a bond between them, a bond that had ancient and sacred meaning in her culture. He looked up at Lyra, his mind racing. And what happens now? What does this bond mean? Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on his. It means that for as long as you live, you are part of our family. Zathra will always be in your care. You are now bound to protect him as I will protect you. But it is not just an obligation. It is something that, in time, will become a choice. It is a bond of trust, of respect. And yes, there is more to it than that. But I will give you time to understand. Ethan was silent for a long moment. He had always thought of himself as someone who helped when it was needed. But now, with Lyra's words echoing in his mind, the weight of what he had done seemed to grow heavier. He wasn't just a medic anymore. He wasn't just a man who had saved a child. He had become part of something much larger. He had become part of their world. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. I don't know if I'm ready for this. This bond, I'm just a human. I don't know how I can live up to something so sacred. Lyra smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. You don't have to live up to it right away, Ethan. Time will show you the way, and we will help you understand. Ethan felt a strange comfort in her words, though doubt still lingered in his mind. He wasn't sure how to navigate this new reality, but he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same. He had made a promise without even realizing it, and now he had to live with the consequences, whatever they might be. But as Lyra's words lingered in the air, he couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward her. Her strength, her warmth, her presence. There was something about her that resonated deep inside him. It wasn't just gratitude he felt. It was a connection that went beyond anything he had ever known. Lyra stood, her gaze never leaving his. Rest, Ethan, you need your strength. There is much for you to learn, but for now, focus on healing. Zathra will be fine. And in time, so will you. Ethan nodded, his mind still reeling, but he could feel a sense of peace settle over him as he lay back against the soft bedding. Lyra's presence was comforting, though he knew he was far from understanding everything that was unfolding around him. But for now, he closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest, knowing that the path ahead would be anything but simple. Ethan spent the next few days in a haze, his body healing slowly from the brutal injuries he had suffered. The ship, the Eldoria, was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a marvel of alien engineering, a sleek and shining vessel that hummed with an otherworldly energy. Everything on board seemed so far removed from the simple, utilitarian ships he had worked on during his time as a medic. But it wasn't just the ship that was alien to him. Everything about this new world was strange, overwhelming. Lyra's presence seemed to fill the space around him, commanding yet gentle, always just a step away. She was a woman of power and grace, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that her every move was intentional, measured. The conversations they shared, though brief, were always insightful. Lyra spoke little about her own past, but she often shared stories about her people. Her species was ancient, and their history was rich with both beauty and conflict. Ethan learned that she wasn't just any alien mother. She was the leader of her people, a figure of immense influence and respect. One evening, as the stars outside, the window of the Eldoria sparkled like distant diamonds, Lyra sat beside Ethan in the small common area. She had been quiet for a while, gazing out at the endless stretch of space. Ethan had grown accustomed to the silence between them, though it was never uncomfortable. She had an air about her, something he couldn't quite understand yet, but something that intrigued him. "You are healing well," Lyra said, her voice breaking the silence. She looked over at him with those deep golden eyes, her expression soft. Ethan nodded slowly, his side still sore but much better than before. "Yeah, thanks to you and your people." Lyra gave him a small smile. It is not just our healing technology that saved you, Ethan. You saved yourself as well. The bond between you and Zathra has strengthened, and it will continue to grow stronger, as is the custom of my people. Ethan sat up a little straighter, his brow furrowing. The bond, you keep mentioning that. But I still don't understand. What does it really mean for me? Lyra paused, her gaze steady as she considered her words. In my culture, when a being saves the life of a child in such a way, it is more than an act of gratitude, it is a sacred bond. It is a lifelong connection, one that transcends time and space. A bond of protection, of duty, and of deep respect. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that. I just did what anyone would have done. I saved him because it was the right thing to do. Lyra's gaze softened. You are kind to believe that. But in the eyes of my people, it is not just an act of kindness. It is a union. You are now part of Zathra's life, and by extension, part of mine. You have accepted the responsibility of being his protector, and that is a bond that cannot be taken lightly. Ethan looked away, his thoughts racing. But I didn't sign up for any of this. I didn't know what it would mean. I just wanted to help him. Lyra leaned forward, placing a hand gently on his arm. I know this is difficult to understand, but you need to understand one thing, Ethan. This bond goes beyond obligation. It is a deep respect for the life you have given to Zathra, and, in time, it will grow into something more, something that ties you to my people, to our world. Ethan's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and uncertainty. He had always lived a simple life, a life devoted to helping others without expecting anything in return. Now, suddenly, he was part of something he couldn't fully grasp. The thought of being tied to an alien culture, bound by something he didn't fully understand, was overwhelming. But there was something about Lyra, something about the way she spoke and the way she carried herself that made him listen. She wasn't forcing him into anything. She was explaining, offering him the chance to understand. He saw the depth of her conviction, the way she believed in the sacredness of the bond, and he couldn't help but respect her for it. Lyra gave him a moment to absorb her words. Then, as if sensing his inner turmoil, she stood and began to walk toward a table on the far side of the room. She picked up a small, crystalline object, a pendant of some kind. The crystal gleamed with an inner light that seemed to pulse gently. She held it out to him. This is the symbol of our bond, a gift from mother to protector. It represents the commitment we share, your commitment to Zathra and to me. Ethan stared at the crystal, feeling the weight of the moment. What is it? What does it do? Lyra's expression was calm, yet there was a glint of something ancient in her eyes. It is a physical representation of the bond. When it is worn, it will serve as a reminder of the promise you made, not just to Zathra, but to our people, and it will strengthen the connection between us. Ethan took the crystal, feeling its smooth surface against his fingertips. It was light, yet there was a strange energy emanating from it as if it were alive. He didn't fully understand it, but he could feel something stirring deep within him, something that resonated with the idea of duty and protection. He looked up at Lyra, his voice quiet. I'm not sure if I can live up to this, Lyra. This is a lot to take in. Lyra smiled softly, a warmth in her expression that made Ethan feel at ease, even as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. You don't have to live up to it all at once, Ethan. This bond will grow over time. You are not alone in this. I will be here to guide you, to help you understand. Ethan nodded slowly, the crystal still in his hand. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since he had been pulled into this alien world, he felt a sense of clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. Lyra was right. He had made a promise, and he would honor it. But there was something else, something deeper, that Ethan couldn't deny. In Lyra's presence, he felt a strange pull, an attraction that went beyond gratitude or duty. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was there, and it was undeniable. Lyra watched him with a quiet intensity, as if she could see into the depths of his thoughts. There is more to this bond than just duty, Ethan. Over time you will come to understand that. It is a bond of hearts, of trust, and I believe it will grow into something beautiful. Ethan met her gaze, his heart racing with a mix of confusion and something else, something he couldn't quite place. But for the first time since the chaos of the attack, he felt a sense of peace. He was no longer just a medic on a cargo ship. He was something more now, something tied to a powerful alien woman, to a child he had saved, and to a bond that would shape the rest of his life. As Lyra stood there, watching him with an unreadable expression, Ethan felt something stir within him. A sense of responsibility, yes, but also a sense of connection that he couldn't ignore. The future was uncertain, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. The days following Ethan's recovery felt like a blur. He had been thrust into a new life, one that was so different from the simple existence he had known. No longer was he just a medic on a cargo ship, traveling through space with a quiet life. He was now tied to something much greater, something more profound than he had ever imagined. As the ship moved deeper into the vastness of space, Ethan spent his time learning more about Lyra's people, their culture, and the customs that bound him to them. It was strange at first, trying to understand the depth of the bond he had created by saving Zathra, but with each passing day he felt a little more at ease. Lyra, ever patient, explained everything to him. She spoke of her species' long history, of the honor and respect that came with the bond. But she also spoke of the love her people held for their families, the fierce protection they showed, and the importance of loyalty. These were things Ethan understood on a basic level, even if he had never thought of them in the way Lyra explained. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet of the ship, Lyra spoke of the upcoming journey to her home planet, Thera, where the bond would be formally acknowledged. Ethan's chest tightened at the thought. He wasn't sure what to expect. Lyra had mentioned it before, but now the weight of it seemed heavier. Ethan, Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. Are you ready for what lies ahead? Ethan turned to face her. She was seated across from him, her golden eyes steady as always. There was something about her presence, something both commanding and calming at once. He found himself drawn to her strength, but also to the kindness that she carried in her heart. She wasn't just a leader. She was a mother, a protector, and someone who had shown him a kind of grace he had never known. I'm not sure what to expect, Ethan said honestly. But I know one thing for sure, I don't want to let you or Zathra down. Lyra smiled gently. You won't, Ethan. You've already proven yourself to us. But there is more to this journey than just responsibility. There is trust and there is something deeper. We will face challenges, but we will face them together. Ethan nodded, though the uncertainty still lingered in his mind. What did Lyra mean by something deeper? He had never thought of himself as anything extraordinary. He had done what anyone would have done. But now this bond between them, this connection, was growing into something he didn't fully understand. The thought of traveling to Thera was both exciting and overwhelming. Thera was a planet of great beauty, lush landscapes that stretched as far as the eye could see, but it was also a planet of great power, where Lyra's people held sway over vast regions of space. The responsibility that came with being tied to Lyra, being part of her family, meant stepping into a world of politics, customs, and traditions that Ethan was far from prepared for. The ship's journey to Thera took several days, and during that time Ethan and Lyra spent hours together, talking and learning about each other. They shared stories of their past, their cultures, and their worlds. Ethan spoke of his life on Earth, of his work as a medic, of the quiet moments he had spent with family and friends. Lyra, in turn, spoke of her own upbringing, the challenges of growing up on a planet of such power, and the expectations placed on her from a young age. Though their worlds were vastly different, Ethan found common ground with her. They were both shaped by the need to protect, to care for those they loved. It was a bond that transcended their species, their cultures, and their pasts. They were both, in their own way, driven by duty and love. Finally, the Eldoria arrived in the orbit of Thera. The planet loomed large before them, a world of deep greens and blues, its surface marked by vast oceans and towering mountains. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. A world full of life and energy, a world that pulsed with power. As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, Ethan's heart raced. He could feel the weight of what was coming, the formal acknowledgement of the bond, the meeting with Lyra's people, the pressure of living up to the expectations placed on him. But he also felt something else, something that had been growing inside him since the moment he had saved Zathra. He felt a deep sense of connection to this place, to Lyra and to Zathra. The ship touched down on the landing platform, and the moment Ethan stepped out, he was met with a sea of faces. Lyra's people stood in rows, their eyes fixed on him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Some were tall and imposing, while others were smaller, but all had a presence that was unmistakable. They watched him with a quiet intensity, as if they were measuring him, testing him. Lyra stepped forward, her posture regal, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. "This is Ethan," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "The one who saved my son. The one who has become bound to our family." The crowd parted and a figure stepped forward, an older woman, her face lined with age and wisdom. She was tall, her skin dark like polished stone, and her eyes were sharp but filled with kindness. She was Lyra's mother, and she held a certain authority that was immediately apparent. "Welcome to Thera, Ethan," she said, her voice deep and commanding. "You have shown yourself worthy of our respect. You have saved our future." Ethan stood tall, though his nerves threatened to get the best of him. "I didn't do it for respect," he said, his voice steady. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Lyra's mother nodded, a smile touching her lips. "And that is why you are here, not because of some duty, but because of your heart. We do not honor the strong alone, but those with a deep sense of compassion." Ethan was humbled by her words, but there was still a sense of uncertainty within him. The weight of this new life, this new bond, was heavy, and he wasn't sure if he could live up to the expectations placed on him. But then Lyra was beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. "Ethan," she said softly, "this is just the beginning. There is much for you to learn, but you will never be alone." He looked up at her, meeting her gaze. There was a warmth there, a promise of something more, something that went beyond duty. He could see it in her eyes, the trust she had placed in him, and he realized that he had already made a choice, not just to protect Zathra, but to stand by her, to stand by this new family. In that moment, everything became clear. The future was uncertain, yes, but it was also full of possibilities. Ethan had crossed a threshold. He had saved a life, and in doing so, he had created a bond that would shape his future forever. And with Lyra by his side, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.